Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to I Care About You, the podcast where we dive deep into the realities of our emotional and mental well-being, our path and purpose, and our relationship to self-love and resilience. I'm your host, Juliana J., and today we're talking about self-perfectionism and how it prevents us from relationships, love, adventure, achieving our dreams and goals, and frankly, just living life to the fullest. I want to start with the simple truth. No one is perfect. It might seem like they are sometimes, but in reality, being perfect lies in being imperfect. Allowing for mistakes, wrong turns, bad moments, failure, and everything else that life throws at you is actually where the perfection lies. Because frankly, people we most admire and respect are okay with acknowledging their own imperfections. They show us resilience, vulnerability, understanding, self-compassion, and so many more admirable characteristics. They are comfortable with not being perfect because humans are not perfect. And so in essence, their imperfection is actually showing you what it's like to be human. I bring all this up because even though I have this podcast, people have referred to me as an expert in the field, I have a book, I'm an author, I still have so much to learn. And I am a complete screw up at times. In fact, almost on the daily. I have to be real. Changing old behaviors I don't value is hard. I fall back into bad habits when I feel angry or undermined or devalued, and when I feel like my true identity or intention gets twisted to support a narrative that someone else is spinning. Basically, when I feel I'm being judged or have been judged or are not being represented authentically, I have a hard time not lashing back. It's really hard for me. I hold on to it, I dwell on it, I obsess about it, and then when the opportunity arises, I say things I wish I could take back. I keep trying to improve, though. I don't want to be that person. For example, a recent situation got me into this angry wheel, I call it, where I do exactly that. I obsess about a situation and get really angry about it. I have a hard time letting it go. And I made a few comments I wish I could take back. I'm not proud of it, but I'm still learning and working on myself, and that is sometimes hard to swallow. It's hard to acknowledge that I'm not perfect simply because of my age or what people refer to me as in the field or any kind of education I have or a job title or any type of social standing I may be privileged enough to have. I'm not exempt from screw-ups. I want to point out that striving to be a better person does not have to involve an end goal of perfection. Striving to be a better person should also allow one to be a real human being, not an image or a stereotype of what you're supposed to be, like a prominent business person or a good daughter or whatever those stereotypes are, the perfect parent, that those things don't actually exist. And realizing that although we make a mistake, there are things we can do to ease that pain or shift the situation that occurred. For example, I can apologize for my bad behavior. I can think about ways to not do that in the future and then apply them when needed. I can give myself some grace. I can be sorry, even guilty, but not harbor shame or allow it to become part of my daily self-talk. And figuring out if perfectionism is really holding us back, we need to figure a few things out. One, why are we holding ourselves up to an unrealistic idea of perfection? Are we doing that? And if so, why? How do we handle our own imperfections? Are they limiting us or liberating us? For example, if you know there's something that you have defined as imperfect about yourself, are you using it to create negative self-talk, to become a wallflower, to not engage in things you would like to engage in, or is it liberating you? How can we recognize it when we are holding ourselves up to an ideal or a perfect definition? There's a few questions you can ask yourself here. What drives the choices that you make? Is it a desire for growth or a pressure to appear perfect or to get approval or to get kudos or to get attention? What drives the choices that you make? And really go deep with that. Even things like, why do you go to the gym? Is it to take care of yourself and be healthy, or is it to fit into a societal mold of some kind? And what is that societal mold, and why do you feel the need to fit into it? Why haven't you taken a painting class that you always wanted to take, or any other kind of education that involves other people? Are you afraid of being judged? Afraid of having beginner level work? Are you afraid of not knowing the lingo, not knowing anybody there in the class, not being able to ask intelligent questions? You worry you don't know enough about the subject. So many limiting beliefs about yourself. And you can ask yourself, is that because I have this version of perfection that I don't match up to? So I'm using perfection to create all these limiting thoughts about myself and to limit my ability to get out in the world and do all the things I want to do and I want to join. Like being in an improv group. Are you worried you'll be the worst one there, but you've always wanted to do it? Trace those thoughts back to what you think you should be, or what would you need to be in order to go take that improv class? What would you need to be? Is it an idea of perfection, a stereotype? Would you still do them if no one saw or acknowledged your efforts? That's another thing to think about. What are you actually doing? And would you do them just for the sheer joy of it without getting any kudos or acknowledgments or any kind of affirmations in that regard? And then ask, why are you doing them? Now, of course, I'm discounting work performance and things like that, but you can take work performance a little too far, and it can then become this need to be perfect. I certainly did that, which led to burnout, which took me years to overcome, simply because I was trying to be the perfect employee. So there's a balance there with that. But some things you actually have to do because they're responsibilities that you have. But there are other things you're doing for quote unquote joy or entertainment or personal time that you're doing just to get kudos or something like that. And those are the things you need to look at a little bit more closely. Imagine living without the need for everyone to admire your actions and ideas. Who might you become? Would you be freer to try things, to create more, to live in different ways, to even pursue different types of living or lifestyles or jobs or places to live? What is keeping you from doing those things? Is it that you are trying to be someone's impression of what a perfect person is? We're taught that perfection is the ultimate goal, and the absence equates failure. This is a really horrible loop to get into because you can't be perfect. Many of us decide that the absence of perfection equals a failure. For example, my situation of saying a few things I shouldn't have said, I completely, immediately went to I am not a good communicator. I am not good at being able to say what I need to say. I didn't stand up for myself first, so I don't have boundaries. It just snowballs. It just snowballs into this thing of affirming that you're a failure in so many ways, rather than just seeing it as a blip or a bump in the road. This idea that it's either perfectionism as the ultimate goal or the absence of perfectionism equals failure, that is false. Perfection isn't a destination. It's a fleeting, impermanent few moments of perceived perfection. It's just that. It's only moments. No one lives there permanently. We only have these brief moments of perfectionism when all the stars align, as you could say, or we see something that leaves us in awe. Our hard work pays off. These moments of perfection, we get the best news of our lives, but we don't live there. So I want to talk about the trap of perfectionism. Chasing perfection often leads to unhappiness. The idea that being flawless equates to worthiness is a myth. Instead, striving for constant perfection can create unfulfilling habits and amplify feelings of inadequacy. So let's debunk perfectionism a little bit. Vulnerability is actually a strength. We're told that showing weakness makes us less likable, but studies reveal the opposite. Vulnerability fosters connection. Admitting mistakes, laughing at yourself, or trying to do something new makes you more relatable to everybody else and likable, and actually makes you more admired than if you were somebody who never showed that side of yourself. Another myth I want to debunk is that achievement does not require perfection. So a lot of us think that in order to achieve, we have to be perfect, but perfectionism isn't a prerequisite for success. Goals are still achievable through learning and collaboration. Flexibility often leads to better outcomes than rigid perfectionist ideals. Letting go of outdated goals opens the doors to new possibilities. So again, this is about being flexible and being able to learn from what's happening and collaborate with others. Actually makes you more likable and more respected than if you were rigid in perfectionist ideals and you did things only by yourself, and your idea of when something was successful, it had to be perfect. Often, we do this to ourselves by continuing to raise the bar on a goal. So we have a goal, we achieve the goal, and then we raise the bar to ourselves. Like getting a new job that we want, we get that job, we achieve that goal, but immediately we feel that we didn't negotiate enough for salary, and now that's another thing, or just something we beat ourselves up about. So we never realize that we've achieved the goal. We never give it to ourselves. Another thing we need to really talk about with regards to perfectionism that so many of us actually do not believe or are conditioned to think is not true, but it really actually is. The second I say it, you're going to go, yeah, of course. Being a beginner, we often think makes us stupid, not smart enough, not good enough. It's a negative aspect we put to it. But being a beginner is really brave because so many of us are afraid to be the beginner, the first person to try it, because we are rooted in this need to be perfect at everything. Fear of imperfection stops us from trying new things, but everyone starts out as an amateur. Mastery is impossible without first embracing imperfection. Being a beginner is liberating, and it leads to unexpected joys. There's just so much about being a beginner. You can make mistakes. You have permission. You can give yourself permission to make mistakes. You can experiment, whereas you might not experiment otherwise. It just leads to so much. New ideas, new ways of thinking about things, new ways of going about things, meeting new people, finding yourself in new spaces that are exciting and interesting to you, learning new things and being able to ask questions. That was a big thing for me. For a long time, I never asked questions because asking a question implied that you didn't understand the subject matter, and that meant you're imperfect. So there's just so much about being a beginner that is really in the depths of learning in deep and amazing and new ways and growing and expanding. Another thing I want to debunk here is that high standards isn't perfectionism. High standards are boundaries, are goals aligned with your values. For example, not settling for underpaid work or setting financial goals are healthy standards. However, the standards block growth or stifle fun. They need reevaluation. Balance is the key here. So having high standards for, like, say, people you date or get into intimate relationships with or friendships with, that is great. Your standards need to be in balance, of course. They can't be too outrageous or too unobtainable, and they can't be so rigid that there's no room for mistakes or wrong turns or misunderstandings. But high standards are kind of a form of boundaries and goals. If you want to obtain a certain level at work, you might have to have high standards or goals in order to achieve that. High standards aren't perfectionism. You need to allow for the balance and for imperfect moments, days, times, thoughts, experiences, conversations to occur within that framework of where you're trying to go. So we should talk a little bit about the pressure of perfection. Perfectionism creates a lot of anxiety, often rooted in fear of judgment, fear in general, fear of what people will think of you. But ask yourself, who is judging you? Is it factual or is it just an assumption you have? Do you know for sure you're being judged all the time? Surround yourself with people who accept you and let go of those who perpetuate judgment. I have a few of those in my life. Sometimes they're really hard to let go of for whatever reason. They're someone's very close friend or partner or family member or something like that. And just realize that's their thing, this judgment thing they're doing. And often a super judgy person is ultimately just really insecure, and they're judging others so they can feel good about themselves for a moment. There's a whole host of other reasons for it, but I basically just want to point out that a super judgy person has their own stuff to deal with, and they're working through it by lashing out. I know this because I used to be one of those people. I try really hard not to be that, but some days, I'll fall back into it and judge somebody simply because I'm trying to feel good about my own inadequacies and my own, what I perceive as quote unquote failures. Try to surround yourself at least with a couple people who understand and aren't judging you. How can you recognize these thoughts of perfectionism or characteristics of perfectionism, and what can you do? How do you recognize these traits in yourself? Here's just a few. Overworking and people-pleasing. That's a huge one for me. I still have a problem people-pleasing and overworking. They're hand in hand, right? You're only overworking to people-please, really, or to get some sort of kudos. Another thing, I am also guilty of this, is procrastination due to the fear of failure. I mean, procrastination is really tied to a fear of failure. You don't want to proceed forward because there are things that might happen, could happen, that would be embarrassing or would lead to people judging you in a way that you don't want to be judged, or thinking about your work in a way that you don't want to be think about. Or maybe it's something like starting a new business and you feel like you might fail and that would be embarrassing, and so you procrastinate on it. Another way you can tell if you have perfectionism belief system is you avoid new experiences. Now, we've already kind of talked about this. You avoid them to prevent embarrassment of some kind. And that's really limiting yourself to all the things you could do or want to do in life because you're avoiding them for fear of embarrassment. Sometimes perfectionism shows up in highlighting your flaws to deflect judgment. A lot of people who feel that they're very, very imperfect, but they're subconsciously trying to live up to this idea of perfection, spend a lot of time highlighting their own flaws to deflect any kind of judgment. So they aren't highlighting their flaws to show somebody, hey, don't be so hard on yourself, I've been there too. Or they're not highlighting their flaws to show that, look, I made all these mistakes before I find success, so don't worry if you're feeling that way too. But they're highlighting their flaws for no reason other than to deflect judgment. So you might be at a party and someone's talking and they're self-deprecating for no reason. That's what I'm talking about. Another thing that really pinpoints that you are too concerned with perfectionism is struggling with intimacy and self-acceptance. So this can be in relationships. You don't get in too close. You don't really divulge all of yourself. You project a persona to someone who you're in a relationship with of any kind, friendship, romantically, what have you. You project this persona that isn't actually who you are because you're projecting this perfect girlfriend, this perfect partner, this perfect BFF. In that way, the relationship can only go so deep because you're not intimate in the relationship, you're not vulnerable in the relationship, and you have a hard time with self-acceptance, so you won't accept yourself. Another thing about that, with regard to struggling with the intimacy, is you won't be vulnerable. You'll never put yourself in a place where you can be vulnerable. And if you are vulnerable, you'll hide it. Perfectionism can rob you of joy, intimacy, opportunities, but you can break free from it. There are many ways you can break free, and there are many other ways, more than I mentioned, about how you can notice it in yourself, but probably a few of those you can relate to. Because let's face it, in this modern world, at least in the United States, in this individualistic society that we live in, perfection is the goal. We've all been trained to be there, to do that. Every single one of us has this strange relationship with trying to be perfect, but never ever being so. It's like a setup for failure and for negative self-talk and feelings of worthlessness. We're all set up like that. We all feel it, but we also can all break free from this need to be perfect. A few things you can do to break free are embrace discomfort. Step out of your comfort zone. Try new things, meet new people, and thank yourself for having the courage to grow. You can start in really small ways. I talk about this a lot, getting out of your comfort zone, because it's really a life-changing situation if you can do it. Start with small ways and work up to challenging ways to step out of your comfort zone. Just try a new thing. Start out with that. Say hi to somebody when you never would. If you're somebody who walks down the street and stands in line at the coffee house and never says one word to somebody, start with saying something nice to somebody, or just saying hello, or telling somebody you like their shoes or whatever in a genuine way, and start that as stepping out of your comfort zone and expand it. Try new things. Go deeper with embracing discomfort. Another thing that's really, really important in all aspects of life is to affirm your worth. Look in the mirror daily and remind yourself that you're worthy. Say to yourself, I am worthy just as I am. Remind yourself about this throughout the day, that you are worthy, because this notion of being perfect really creates a profound sense of worthlessness in all of us. I think if we're all true to ourselves, we can acknowledge that within inside of who we are, there are pockets where we feel unworthy. Some of us much more than others, but I really think the majority of us will go through our lifetimes thinking we aren't even worthy of it. Another thing you can do is acknowledge acceptance. Notice when others accept you unconditionally and appreciate those moments. When they come up, acknowledge that you're being accepted. Acknowledge that your friend wants to be with you. Acknowledge that people want to spend time with you. Acknowledge that people care about you and are not so concerned with what you're doing that isn't perfect. A great thing that really helps you out in life, another one, is to learn from mistakes. Mistakes are part of being human. You're not going to get through this lifetime without making so many mistakes you'll lose count. When you mess up, apologize if needed, learn from it, move forward, celebrate the bravery it took to make the mistakes and to grow. Really realize that mistakes can also be incredibly powerful moments to move forward closer to your goals in life. Mistakes are a superpower, and learning from your mistakes rather than using them to enforce negative self-talk is so important. Shift what you think about mistakes. Mistakes aren't there so that you can go beat yourself up about what you are not, but rather mistakes are just lessons. And what can you learn from them? What can you take with you? And what can you grow? And realize it is brave to learn from your mistakes. It's easy to use mistakes to feel like you're lesser than you were before you made the mistake. So be brave. And with that, also celebrate your progress. Physically pat yourself on the back or hug yourself and say, well done, when you step out of your comfort zones. Studies show that these gestures have a powerful positive effect, believe it or not. Just taking the moment to celebrate your progress is incredible. You'll be really shocked at how powerful that positive effect is if you just take a moment to celebrate your progress, your milestone, the little things, the big things. When you get out of your comfort zone, it just reinforces the positiveness around all of those things rather than reinforcing, oh, I'm just not that good at this, or whatever your negative self-talk is. Shift it. Celebrate the progress rather than using it to think of how you just aren't measuring up. When you let go of perfectionism, you will discover a few things that are really great, like peace. There's a lot more peace in your life, which creates a lot more time. When you let go of perfectionism, you will find that you have more time in the day. It's a very strange phenomenon, but 100% true, because you aren't using spare moments to reinforce negative self-dialogue and to beat yourself up about not being perfect. You'll have a lot more drama-free days because you're going to slowly stop trying to defend all your imperfections. You don't need to do that anymore. And so in letting go of that, you're not embroiled in this drama of constantly trying to make excuses for yourself or to beat yourself up about it or to get in arguments or to be angry or to have emotions that lead you to more drama. You'll be able to just accept it. Yes, I screwed up. I'm so sorry. And that will be the end of your drama. You'll find that you have a much calmer mind because when you're really worried about perfectionism, or at least when I was really worried about perfectionism, of course I still am. It's very hard to give it up. I don't know if it's possible to do so. But in those moments, when you can let it go, you don't have to spend all your waking moments obsessing about it in your mind. And your mind is much calmer and open to think about other things. You'll give yourself the freedom to live authentically. So maybe you'll try things, do things, shift, be different, make a bold move, just live more authentically within yourself. When you have a little blip or a mistake happens or something that you perceive as imperfect happens, you'll be able to live authentically with it. Oh, I'm taking this as a learning moment and I'm doing this instead. You're just giving yourself the freedom to be who you actually are and to not have to create all these personas to keep up an image that you feel isn't really part of who you actually are. When you give up perfectionism, you can start to create boundaries, stronger boundaries, and self-care, because you realize when, this is something I really need to give myself some self-care, or I let go of a boundary here and I need to reestablish that, or to just feel good enough to have boundaries within yourself. When you don't have a lot of worthiness, when you feel like you're worthless, it's really hard to uphold boundaries, because why would you have boundaries when you're worthless? You will develop a resilience in the face of criticism and just in failure and all things in life. You'll just create this incredible resilience, which is so powerful and is really actually something people are drawn to when you're resilient, just like when you're vulnerable. Those two ways of being are profound, and people respond to it because we all wish we could be resilient and vulnerable and it was safe and okay to do so. And remember, change isn't linear. It's messy and unpredictable, but it's worth it. Be kind to yourself. You're doing amazing work. So my dear lovely friends, I wish you a transformational month as we close out the year. And remember, you have the power to transform. No one else has your power, and you are powerful, and you are worthy of change. If you found today's episode helpful, please share it with somebody who might also need to hear it. If you want to dive deeper into self-care and professional growth, don't forget to subscribe and click the little bell if you're on YouTube to I Care About You so you never miss an episode. Order my book, Reasons to Live, on my website for more practice on learning to navigate dark times. And until next time, remember, you are loved and your journey matters. And perfection is not the end point. It's living authentically into your life in a way that brings you joy. So take good care of yourself and know that I love you and I support you and we're all in this together. You aren't alone. Take care.